Greetings all. Welcome back to the Coptimizer podcast. We've got another amazing guest today, Eric Reynolds, aka KetoFiveO. For those of you in the keto world, or follow him on Twitter. We had a great conversation before we kicked off live here, and we're going to call this conversation 2.0 because had some internet issues. So we had to restart. And the irony of this is, and we'll get into it, is that it was on my end and not on the Nomad's end. So welcome to the show, Eric.
Hey, thanks for having me. No, my brother-in-law in his driveway where we're parked for today, he's got really good Wi-Fi. So I was shocked. I was like, really? It can't be us.
So for those of you that don't know Eric's story, he's living the life. He's living the dream. After a 20-year career in policing, he retired and is now living on the road in a mobile lifestyle. So that's pretty cool.
Yep, we travel around our 28-foot toy hauler, and we travel the country, and we have plots where we go and directions we like to kind of pick, but we always end up going another direction. That's what's kind of fun about this life. Nothing's really planned or in concrete 100%.
Yeah, and it's such a cool story. And you were saying right before my internet took a dump on us and we had to reboot. But the fact that for you and for your family, you started this lifestyle before COVID hit, like before in you said in 2018. So you were ahead of the curve. Like there a lot of people now, in the post-COVID world, living in the Sprinter vans and driving the country and doing stuff like this, but you got started before that.
Yeah, my wife, we had decided to retire on my 50th birthday in 2019, and we were already going to RV shows and looking around. I thought she was crazy, but you got to make them happy, right? So we had seen treehouse shows, we'd seen tiny homes and all this stuff. And she's like, yeah, we'll just bring her home with us everywhere. And I'm like, this lady's nuts, and I got the Baker actors. So, but we rented a couple of trailers at some nice parks that were near the water and the beaches, and it was kind of cool to just walk out of a trailer and to see some of the sights that are out there, and it opened my eyes, and then I met a brother, and he'd been RVing for 10 years, which that was a surprise. So I started camping with him, and then my eyes opened up to it, not to do it forever, but just as a new hobby that we love to do. And right now with my kids, I told you we pulled them out of school in 2018, just because we didn't like the direction of school, and he needed a different type of learning. And man, what an adventure to be with them. They're learning on the road, they're seeing so many different sights, and just going through, like I was telling you, saw 5 Great Lakes last summer. We've seen all the Smokies and the Blue Ridge Parkway, and just seeing that just with your kids and not being in a hurry. We're not in a hurry. It's not, I don't have to be back for I got shift, I got to work Monday, or I got a meeting, or it's all open. We don't have to go back. We can keep going, but COVID restrained us a little bit. We didn't know where we could go because of some of the regulations and the rules, and, but we pretty much hung around the South, and we never knew COVID was going on for the most part. The campgrounds were campgrounds, hiking, you were in nature, you're experiencing life. So as far as my kids know, they just think this COVID thing's a TV show that they're seeing once in a while on TV,
Wow. That's crazy. Yeah. And you were saying your kids, they saw all 5 Great Lakes.
Yeah.
Which is most people, I would say, venture to say in the US, I know I haven't seen all of them. I've seen three of them. Yeah, that's pretty cool. And I live an hour away from Lake Michigan. And from an hour away from where you had your trailer. Where'd you say you had your trailer manufactured? Where you had it custom made?
Oh yeah, I was over there in Elkhart, I guess, around that area. And yeah, I mean, this whole trailer life, I never towed anything in my life. It was a whole new experience. I had to learn how to drive towing stuff, and not to take out stop signs or curbs or pedestrians or parked car. I mean, it was stressful, man. I hadn't felt that stressful since I was released off probation, was driving the police car for the first time. Like, don't wreck it, don't hit anything.
So when'd your police career start?
It started pretty much around 2001. I got hired by Boynton Beach. I caught shoplifters in that city for a while, so I was used to the officers coming and arresting, a store like Macy's, and we were pretty aggressive in chasing shoplifters. We would chase them through parking lots and other stores, so it was kind of like the Wild West. And they kept saying, "Hey, man, why don't you come join us? You get this cool Batman belt, you get a gun, you get pepper spray." Because I was just rolling with handcuffs, and it was a lot more hand-to-hand combat that I was dealing with some of these shoplifters, because they know I was the direct link to jail. So they were going to fight me rather than a cop. And I don't know, I started thinking about the pension, my mom being soon at that point, a soon to be retired, sergeant from Miami-Dade. I started thinking about my future. I was almost 30 something years old. And I'm like, yeah, I should start thinking about having a pension outside the private sector, something that I could hold on to and work towards. And, put my hat in the ring and got hired. And then all the real education began.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So you're now the second guest that I've had on the podcast whose mom was a police officer.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Well,
Michael,
my dad was also a cop in the Air Force, so that might help out, right?
I did that for a while. I was security police from 1986 to 1990, just to date myself.
Yeah, my dad did all that. We were in Okinawa. We went all the way, I think, Billings. We were in Wyoming. We're all over the place before I was even 5 years old. I was like a world traveler. Maybe that's where I get it from.
Yeah, maybe that nomad was just lying in wait and just waiting to reemerge.
Yeah. So yeah, my mom was a cop. She was pretty hardcore. She was a cop in the mid-70s. She got hired. She was one of the only female officers back then. She was Cuban, so she spoke Spanish, and that was a very valuable asset to have, especially when the whole cartel started shooting up people in the middle of the roadways and malls. And so she got hired, part of that CENTAC task force, to go after the Colombian cartels. And she had a pretty historic career. It's pretty, looking back, I respect a lot more after being a cop for 20 years, knowing what she had to do. But meanwhile, I was in the background, suffering, trying to outsmart a homicide detective in all my trials and tribulations. She used to catch me all the time, man. Just stupid stuff. You get you get grounded. You can't watch TV, right? What do you think I did? I watched TV. The mom comes home, turn off the TV. Well, she walks up, feels the TV. Boom, I'm busted. I was like, man, just like that. I'm already indicted, So, but she was fair. She ruled with she was hard on me, but it was for a reason. And she got me involved in sports. My dad was in another state, so my coaches were usually ex or cops that worked with my mom, or always had eyes on me. And so I was kind of part of the Thin Blue Line family from the minute my mom became a cop. They incorporated me into their lives. They looked after me, and they looked after her, because it was still new to have a female around in those days. I mean, she suffered a lot of, I'm sure, sexism and, stuff that, she probably hasn't even really opened up to me about, but it was pretty cool, and I fell right into it. I just love to be involved, and I always found myself someone's got to say something. It's, whether you're in the store and there's something going down, you're going to stand there or you're going to get involved. And that's kind of how my personality was,
Yeah, and it's interesting to think about, because it's a lot different now. Like nowadays, if you work loss prevention, they're pretty much trained and taught not to chase, right? And just be a good observer, and kind of, what's the point of that, right? Why even have loss prevention if you're not going to do anything about it?
Well, I thought that the first time we chased some burglary suspects, and they called off the chase because it was a property crime. We were so upset about it, but you understand. I mean, what, are you going to crash into a family of 5 because you're trying to catch somebody with a TV?
Yep.
But, you got in this to chase bad guys, so here you are chasing the bad guy, and now you're like, oh, I got to let him go. Oh, and do a report. Oh, you're killing me.
And do the report. Yeah. That's the one thing they never show on the cop shows is the officer sitting there for hours writing reports.
Like, how do I word this? Okay.
Yeah, well, the technology is getting a lot better, but even when I started in 1995, our department, we were using typewriters and carbon paper. I
Wow.
just a couple of years ago, I had this conversation with we were rolling out a new records management system, and I asked the group in the room, like, "Hey, raise your hands if you know what carbon paper is." And like only a couple hands went up. I'm like, "Oh, I am getting old." Like we used to have to type what we called majors. Like if it was a felony or something like that, you had to type that on carbon paper because you needed 5 copies. And if you made a mistake, that mistake went through all those copies. Oh man, what a pain that was. So you were
Um,
like typing with bated breath, hoping not to make a mistake, because then you'd have to make copy. It was just hard to fix. But it was a wonder we got anything done because you spent all your time doing admin and clerical work.
yeah, it's all
I,
covering CYA, all those reports. That's what it seemed like, at the end of it.
so you started in 2001, and one of the things that we'll get into now, and we're going to get to your company and your name and your persona there, the KetoFiveO, which I think I love it. It's a nice, clever play on words. Um, I've told a few people that Coptimizer, Cop optimization. I have, I started, I think 2015 is when I started my website with that name on it, but I was tinkering around with different ones. And the other one I had was called Popo, and that was Police Officer Performance Optimization.
Popo.
So maybe the KetoFiveO and the Popo,
Popo.
we'll do something. We'll do something together one of these days. But so you, speaking of chases, on your website, and for those that are not familiar, you can jump on there, and I have it pulled up here. It's keto50.com, I believe.
Yeah. There's
Keto.
also a link to the YouTube channel that has both videos of the shooting too. So I mean, you can find all that through the website.
So you were involved in a car chase with a bank robbery suspect that ended in a shooting.
Yeah, it
Um,
was one of those typical days where I was leaving early to go play basketball. I was, even though it was getting heavy, I was still trying to stay active, and they sent a bolo out for a bank robbery at the city next to us. And we get those all the time, But I remember this one was a red car with a white top, and they said it was a Crown Vic. I'm like, man, bank robbers just robbing banks in red cars and white tops now. I go, what's it, a convertible? I remember kind of joking about it. And then they sent the night shift guys, the bolo the area. And then I looked at the board. I'm the only available unit in the whole city. I'm like, oh, no. I'm going to get hit with some crash or some domestic or some child, one of those cases. Now you're in it for the long haul, right?
right.
And I was like, oh man, I'm not going to make hoops. And I was one of the 10 guys. We only had 10 playing. So I felt that obligation. I can't let the team down, right? So I put myself on the call. I'm like, hey, I'll be boloing too. All right. I mean, the night guys would have taken over if I got stuck with some. That's kind of how we had it. But, sometimes stuff happens. You get stuck.
Right.
So sure enough, I see a red car coming over the bridge, and it's a Lincoln. It's not a Crown Vic, but it's a white top and black male driver. And that was the bolo. He robbed a bank. The black male, rubber boots and a scarf, a mask on his head. Imagine that, and a gun. So I remember there's some very eerie points when I had passed him, because I had to turn around to get eyes on him again because he was coming over a bridge. And so now we're both sitting kind of opposite each other. And I remember him tapping the steering wheel with his finger.
You guys got the look, right?
It was some very eerie about it. And I didn't realize it at the time, but going back and retelling the stories over and over again, I remember that. And then he made a right turn. So I had to make a U-turn to get behind him, and he gunned it. So he's going kind of fast. I'm letting dispatch know, hey, he just gunned it kind of fast, but I don't know if it's my guy yet, right?
Right.
And then I start catching up to him, and he stops in the middle of Federal Highway, which is one of our big roads, not like a big highway, like a 95 or anything like that, but one of our main roads. And he just stops. And I get up near him, and I hit my rear lights, and he's got a handicap tag. And I'm thinking, handicap tag, bank robbers, we got elderly now robbing banks, so I'm, all these things are going through my mind. We're just sitting there, I'm not rushing it, which I like the fact that it was 10 years into my career. I think maybe younger, I would have jumped out. Hey, your car matches the description, you know? Da, da, da.
Right.
I don't know. I don't know if I rushed it. Maybe I wouldn't have. I don't know. So we sat there for about 5 seconds as I'm waiting for backup, and I'm letting dispatch know, hey, he's just sitting there. And they're like, all right, we're en route. We're en route. You hear all the guys talking. And then he guns it. So now the chase is on. We get a little car chase, a couple parking lots. He sideswipes some cars, and he goes down a local road called Railroad Avenue next to a railroad track. And I'm like, man, this guy must know the neighborhood. So I'm expecting he's going to bail or something, you know, and he ended up crashing really quick, taking a left turn. And he crashed so quick that we rolled up on him kind of fast because we didn't expect the sudden stop. So I wasn't exactly in a really good tactical advantage. So when I jump out of the car, he opened his door because he couldn't get it open all the way from the shooting. He just wedged it. And next thing you know, I just saw the muzzle flash. And I'm seeing the ground popping, and I'm like, oh shit, you know, I'm being shot. And I just remember firing back, like suppression fire. I think I hit the house behind us, you know, behind his car. And
yeah, you can see that in the car cam video on the first. So there's two videos. If you watch video one, you can see the bush, you can see the rounds impacting through the bushes.
Yeah, we fired 38 rounds into the car. I'm sure a lot went through the windshield and kept just bouncing around. And we ended up hitting them 14 times. When we got pulled back from, you know, a couple SWAT guys showed up with the long guns and we're like, hey, we got it, Eric, we got it. And we backed away. And I remember that's when I started feeling the pain in my left foot and my leg. I was like, oh, what's going on? I looked down and see the 3 holes in my shoe. And then I see the blood dripping down my right leg. I was like, oh shit, I got hit. And I was all right though, you know, it wasn't like the movies, like, oh my God, I'm dying. You know, adrenaline's still kicking. You're still in that aggressive, you know, point.
Survival. Yeah, you're in survival mode.
And, you know, I just, you know, they cut the shoe off. I remember being in the ambulance and they're taking me to the hospital. I remember asking the paramedic, I was like, how's the bad guy? Because I didn't know. I never saw what happened. They ended up pulling the guy out trying to do CPR. And he's like, nah, he's dead. And it was like, wow, holy
yeah,
it just happened, right? And thought about my wife. I'm like, oh, I got to call her. And she's at home. My son, who's 5 months, you know, kid's crying in the background. She's like, what? I'm like, oh, there's a little incident. You know, I got nicked in the foot, getting some stitches. She's like, okay, I'll talk to you later. Bye. I was like, all right, well, all right. I didn't know what to really do. I didn't want to cry to her on the phone. Hey, I got shot. So, but, you know, later on, she was at the hospital and she understood, and, you know, obviously talking about it and seeing the video. And she came around and was like, oh my God, it was a lot more serious than I realized. But, you know, at the hospital, you know, just I remember seeing all the guys come visit. It was a happier story than what could have been. I mean, how many times have we gone to those scenes and it's been another story, right? So I get home and I was a big basketball fan, and Miami Heat was playing Oklahoma City in the finals. And I remember, I'm just going to enjoy the game, you know, and popped a Percocet. And I think I poured me a double vodka and something. And I started watching the game, and then they lost. I was like, oh, my team lost on the day I got shot. I go, come on. Right. And I remember the news was coming on, and it says tonight at 11, another officer shot in the line of duty, because we were in one of those periods where cops were getting shot. It was just happening a little bit more in 2012. And I was like, oh my God. And I was like, oh shit, that's me. You know, I didn't even realize I got captured into the news story. And then it starts, oh man, are they going to come after us? Did we do something wrong? You know, it starts to peek in a little bit into your psyche.
Right.
You know, are we going to be judged on this? How critically? Does the department have our back? You know, you start like, because I knew we shot a lot because the guy wasn't complying. And I started thinking about stories like that. Did we shoot too much? Blah, 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 you know, and, you know, and then they're like, we're going to announce the officer's name, you know, in 2 days. You're like, oh my God, they're going to announce my name. And then you start thinking about your fan, you know, it just starts going down another road. It's not like this glamorous thing that you thought at that moment. You know, it gets a little darker as you go down that road, you know.
Well, you know, and that's something that a lot of people that are not in policing don't even consider, right? It's not even, doesn't even come in the front, and, you know, and I guess that maybe that's a good thing that people don't necessarily have to think about stuff like that. But, you know, fast forward 10 years, right? 2022, it's a different world, right? And, you know, it's, we could spend days alone just talking about the use of force itself, and, you know, breaking it down, and the physiology behind it, the psychology behind it. And I was telling you before we went live and recording, and for the guests that are listening, though there is another episode that we have with Mike Malpass, he's a retired Phoenix SWAT officer, written a couple books, Taming the Serpent, Fall 7, Rise 8, but it's really about the physiological response in the body to stress and what actually happens in those encounters. So I would encourage people to listen to that, in addition to hearing, a story like this firsthand from what it's like, because, you just heard from someone who's involved in a police action shooting and didn't even know he'd been shot. Right. And that, people, I think, sometimes just don't think that that's possible. Like, well, how could that be? It's like they don't understand the power of adrenaline and the power of, the body's, that fight or flight mode, the survival mode.
It's a
Yeah.
dark place to get to. I was telling some therapist, I was so in the red and so angry at that moment that I could understand these guys that would, like gladiator times, that would battle. And if I had a sword on me, I would have decapitated that dude. That's how angry I was. Like, I was in such a warrior state at that moment. It's him or us, it's a very primal feeling to be. And it's a scary place because I don't like going there. Because if I'm in that space, bad things are going to happen, and that was part of the things that started happening after the shooting. When I went back to the road, started handling more calls, I was getting into that primal state a lot more. And that's when I started developing a lot more issues. I was like, oh, I'm going to shoot somebody again. Or am I not going to shoot because I'm scared to shoot? And, it starts playing on your psyche,
Yeah. And that's, again, it's such an important topic for people to try to understand. And there's not enough science on it. Like Bill Lewinsky and the Force Science Research Institute, they've done some amazing work, pioneering work in helping people understand these gaps. And there are others that are out there, but that one just comes front and center because you see all the time. And that's the scary thing about today is, you see a lot of police officers, they're guilty until they prove themselves innocent in a use of force encounter. And, people just think like it's a switch that you can turn on and off. Like survival is that simple.
Right. Well, I've never been shot at in my life. We used to do these classes with rookie officers. Anybody that had been involved in a critical incident, we come and talk about it. We had a couple of cops that were shot, and we had some that had to, take lives. And it was very therapeutic, I think, to get it out for us to talk to these young kids and say, hey, dude, man, this shit can get serious really fast. But then a lot of the aftermath is when, that's when your eyes open up, trying to seek help through workers' comp and trying to say, hey, I'm struggling with this. How do I get help? I didn't know who to go to. I was scared. I don't want to be, how do I tell them I'm struggling with this? So luckily, one of my supervisors I reached out to, I got lucky after my shooting. 6 months later, there was an evidence job that opened up, a desk job, Monday to Friday, 8 to 4, not battling holidays. It was the perfect gig for me, especially at that time of my life, the family at home, everything. So I took it. And then I rode that for a while, and I was like, oh, this is cool. I could ride this out. And then a new chief came in. He's like, we can't have a cop in evidence. We need cops out on the road, that type of stuff. And I'm like, oh, no, I'm going back out there.
Those damn chiefs.
I know, right? So I'm like, oh, no, I'm going to go back out there. And I started struggling with it again. And one of my bosses I talked to, he sent me to EAP, and I went with them. And she's like, yeah, you need help. I'm like, what do I do now? She's like, well, you already got a workers' comp claim, go. And, but I had to fight for it. I had to go before a board of 4 attorneys that made me break down in this meeting. And then I finally got the psychologist that I wanted to see, and they finally covered the bill. It's all about money. And that dude taught me how to dance with it, man. And he said, Eric, you're not going to sleep like you used to sleep. You're going to be a lot more hyper vigilant than you used to. You're not going to want to socialize. You're not going to want to just, and everything he was saying was what I was going through, and he never mentioned the weight gain, but he knew I was stressed out, and I was going up my weight, another 30 pounds from my shooting, and I didn't know what to do,
So when you're in 2012, this was June 2012. Were you in pretty good shape at that point? You said you were playing basketball, but
Yeah, it's about
maybe you gained a little bit of weight.
I was about 220. And by the time I was seeking therapy, I was about 240. I mean, I had multiple surgeries on my foot, so that's 3 months each time, where I'm out through rehab. And, I'm still, continuing to drink, eat pizza, and, still have my bad habits that I already had. And I'm not burning the calories like I was, not that it's a calorie game, but at that moment in my life, that's what I thought it was. And I gained weight and got diagnosed with high cholesterol, and then you got heart disease, and then I got a CAC score done, and that was 1,500. And they wanted to put stents in me, and I had a fellow officer who had stents put in, die of a heart attack. So I was always very skeptical, of modern med, the big business that they are. Not that they don't do good things, but I went through the opiate crisis down here in South Florida. We arrested doctors. So they're not all the whole, almighty that they're supposed to be, the regular people that make mistakes, and they get educated one way, and sometimes some of them find another way, which we now part of that whole group of people that are like-minded.
Right.
But this whole new world, it was so new to me. And I didn't want to die of a heart attack because of this job. That was one of my frustrations, seeing cops die. I saw some research. We died 12 years faster than the average guy who already dies too young. And then, I went to, was Dr. Kevin Gilmartin. I went to one of his emotional officer survival classes and understanding about cortisol levels. And then, how stressed we're gaining weight, just being stressed, that opened
Right.
my eye. I always thought it was diet, alcohol. I didn't realize my job was helping, make this happen. So my eyes got wide open when I, played basketball with a guy one day, and he's like, "Hey, you should try this keto thing." I'm like, "Keto? Is that martial arts or some new CrossFit? Do I gotta like throw swords and go run after and do some, like tiger jumps or something?" And it's like, "Nah, man, it's you're eating healthy fats." I didn't even know, dude. I was 40, 48 years old. I never heard of this way of eating.
Yeah, that's
That's what I was mad about. I was like, what? I could have been looking like this when I was 16, 18, 25. What?
well, you do look great now for the people that are listening on Spotify or iTunes or one of the podcast channels. You're gonna have to go to the YouTube channel and not, but also check out your website too. Um, but yeah, that's a it. But your story. Not every officer is going to be involved in a shooting and be shot, right? Thankfully, that's a very, very small percentage, but the stress is there for all police officers. The hypervigilance is there for everybody. The midnight shifts, the interrupted sleep schedules, the on call, all that stuff. It never, that doesn't go away. And I was very fortunate to be able to present with Dr. Gilmartin last year. We presented at the National FOP conference, and he just, he's such a brilliant man, but he's also got a great way of explaining things. But when we were talking to the audience, he asked a question. He's like, raise your hand if you've been trained on how to drive, pursuit driving, right? Just like raise your hand if you've been, trained on how to use your firearm, in defensive tactics. Yeah. Now raise your hand if you've been trained on how to prevent a heart attack. No hands go up, and it really shouldn't be that complicated. And sometimes I think it really is that simple, but oftentimes, sadly in our profession, the first time people will find out that they've got cardiovascular disease is when they survive their first heart attack. And it happens very young.
I was, frustrated with, I was never given the tools, like we study law to be able to arrest somebody. You have to understand how to write, probable cause, and how to be able to, technically you're taking someone's rights away from them when you put them in custody now, right? So you got to know the law, but we never know what we're eating or anything about our nutrition or how to read blood work. Most of us just listen to the doc. All right, that's what he said to do. and I had doctors misdiagnose me, using old tests from 2 years before after I got healthy. And I'm like, dude, that's like 2 years ago. You're reading the wrong one. They're like, oh, my bad. My bad. You were just about to prescribe me medication. It's not my bad, you know? So I don't know. I just took it a lot more seriously. And man, the success I had doing ketogenic for the first 6 months, eliminating pretty much breads and pastas and finding a supplemental form of it and fasting. And man, 6 months later, I was down 50 pounds and I hadn't seen that kind of weight loss. And then mentally, physically, everything just started blossoming. Everything got better, man. Skin rashes, everything. And then, of course, it opened a whole world of other people that you can read about and follow. And wow, this guy lost this weight. And look at this whole website of all these people who lost hundreds and hundreds of pounds. Like I never knew this existed.
So that's crazy. I mean, it's sad that you got to the point where, your health is in decline, you're having these issues. There's no real understanding of what's driving it, what's causing it. And, for people that are listening, you don't have to have been involved in a police action shooting to carry the kind of stress that's going to kill you. Right. That's real. But I think what's pretty inspiring is that you've kind of taken that opportunity and not just helped yourself, but now you're also spreading the word and helping as many people as you can through your story and really through your personal experiences.
That's how the KetoFiveO thing started. We're about a 180-man department, small on some level, but bigger on other levels. But people notice when you start to lose weight. And I went from a 44 down to 36-inch waist at this time at my department. And I'm in evidence. People are coming to the window. I'm rejecting evidence. They hate the evidence guy rejecting stuff, but you got to get it right. And they'll be like, how you losing all this weight, right? I'm like, man, I found this way of eating that a guy I know turned me on to, and it's been working. It's just I'm into it. I understand it. I know about, if I'm craving a little bit of something, it's probably I need some fat or like a fat bomb or something like that. And I'm spreading the word. And then one of my buddies lost 50 pounds. I was working with I was a coach, but I didn't know it. I was just telling him what worked for me. And then he just introduced me to other guys. Hey, KetoFiveO, man. You got to tell them how you did it. How did you help me? And we used to get called 5-0 in the hood all the time. So it's kind of funny. I was like, KetoFiveO, I like that. And I was running a little group on my phone. And then I just put it in the Facebook. Hey, let's start a little Facebook group and spread the word to your friends or your sister or your brother, whoever wants to join. And it started spreading a lot like all these other groups do. You get a little action going and people start spreading the knowledge. And after I retired, I had met a guy, like I was saying earlier, Low Carb USA. And he goes, man, you should go to a nutrition school. We have one online you can do. And then now you can practice and really, perfect this way of teaching people and have something behind it. So I did that for the next 8 months, got my license. And now I'm a sports nutritionist, personal trainer. I can help guys work out, but I'm really big on nutrition. I think a lot of us know how to work out for the most part. I mean, you might need a few tweaks here or there. We know how to lift weights, right? Guys, we know how to do push-ups and squats, but we don't know what we're putting in our bodies. And until we get that under control, man, I don't care how much weight you're lifting or how much running you're doing, you're going to end up getting hurt, or you're going to be, like as they say, you can't outrun a bad diet. And I'm more big on, I never knew how bad sugar was for me on a molecular level. I never knew how bad that stuff really was, or high fructose corn syrup, and all this stuff that they brought in. And my eyes opened up. I read a few books like Nina Teichel's Big Fat Surprise. I started reading or watching documentaries, Fat Fiction, and then, The Magic Pill. And it just started making sense. I'm like, man, I could have just been eating the right foods all this time and just been healthy and not have to, not be uncomfortable going to the beach, taking my shirt off. All this stuff that I suffered all through my teenage years and my, 20s and my 30s, always feeling, insecure about the way my body looked. Even though I worked out, I thought I was doing everything right. I was still gaining weight, So that became my new motivation and helping cops and trying to get them to eat right,
Yeah. And, and you mentioned Dr. Gil Martin because we had we had brought him to our agency here in Indiana. It was in like 2005 timeframe. And, when his book Emotional Survival for Law Enforcement was still fairly new. And that concept of hypervigilance, I think it resonated with a lot of us and we understood it, but there was also a at the time, and I hadn't, and then there was a long period of time in between where I had not seen him present. We brought him to Indiana, I think it was 2017, and he spent the first hour talking about, he likes to use the analogy, the insulin resistant bear.
Right.
And it's, how a bear puts on, how does a bear put on all that weight to hibernate? What are the physiological mechanisms that are in play? Now, I'm not comparing bears to people, but
Right.
there is a process that is that's similar, that people do need to pay attention to. So it's kind of cool. We were on these parallel paths, and I do think that there are pockets of people out there, and it's, of course, keto and the what they call the high fat, low carb nutrition is becoming mainstream now. Whereas 5 years ago, if you tell people you're doing keto, it's like, oh, what cult are you in? And,
Well, they say if you want to know if people do CrossFit, keto, or just wait 5 minutes, they'll let you know, or something like that.
How do you know someone does CrossFit? Because
That's
that's
right.
all they effing talk about, right?
That's what
Yeah.
it is. But
Yeah,
it
I'm
was,
guilty.
I know, I couldn't wait to tell people. They probably got, because, I lost to 50 pounds and got around 200 pounds. I hadn't been that weight since, I was at the academy, I was 220. So I hadn't seen 200 pounds since high school, man. And then I did carnivore. I went into more of an animal, based diet. I got rid of the vegetables because I only threw broccoli and cauliflower in out of guilt. I thought I had to eat them. Avocados, I still love avocados. It's one of the ones I still do. But man, I lost another 25 pounds, but I'd also given up the job at the same time. So it was probably a combination of being stress-free, and I ate a little more clean, and I was still, I was working out, but I didn't run marathons. I didn't start doing stuff any different really than before. I knew it was a little easier to play basketball. I was a little quicker. I could jump higher because I was 50 pounds, 70 pounds lighter. My shot struggled for a little bit. I had to find it. I'm like, man, everything's off now. I got to get zeroed in again. Everything's like clanging off the rim. But mentally, what happened was fantastic. The way my mind started to process information, the way I wasn't bogged down. I wasn't as foggy. It's kind of like, you're feeding your brain cholesterol from the fat and the foods, and it really healed me in a lot of ways. I still battle with it. You walk to a shopping center, I'm like, well, it's today, active shooter. I think about every store I go to, everywhere I go. That's what I think about, which you'd rather be ready than not. It's exhausting, but changing my diet, being more motivated, understanding, I saw abs for the first time in my life on my stomach. I was like, oh, like they are there. I always heard they were there under the fat, but I never knew it. And it was just, my kids still, I still, I had, when you're 250 pounds, I still got some skin, that's, I got to work on and probably fast a lot more. And my son will make fun of me. He's like, Dad, you still got a little flat there. I'm like, yeah, you're 11, dude. And you're eating right because of me. That's why you got a six pack. It's because of me, but, educating my kids, my kids read the back of packages now. Dad, look, there's corn syrup in it, or there's soy. And they're like, I'm like, yeah, get that shit out of here. So, they're my little future educators in the future. I hope maybe they can take on my legacy, long after I'm gone. And, of course, it's all about our family health. I want everyone in my circle to be healthier. And if I could educate them, which is usually the hardest thing to do, is get the people right around you.
Yeah. And that's why, again, another reason why your story is so inspiring. And that's kind of the subtitle of our show here, right? It's how to hire healthy and retire healthy, maximize those opportunities in between. It's like, my big, hairy, audacious goal would be to bankrupt the pension systems for police officers around the country, but that's not happening because the lifespan is anywhere from 18 to 24 years below that of the national average, depending on who you talk with. But I kind of want to go backwards a little bit. So when this person, you're just playing basketball and he mentions keto to you, what were your first steps? What was that, what did you do to kind of get you, to kind of like educate yourself and to get down that path?
He had lost 50 pounds doing it. So I saw what he was doing on the basketball court. And he was already a college athlete at one time. And I was like, wow, like I used to be able to cover him pretty good. Now he's just dusting me. I'm like, he's getting above the rim now. And when he told me about it, he's like, yeah, just go to ketogenic.com. That's all I did. I just put it in and looked it up. I started reading about, and first thing I looked at the recipes. I was like, some of this stuff's not bad, And I started making a couple of recipes. I ordered some food from one of those keto kitchens. What do they make? And I learned how to make it myself. And then meal prep became huge for me, and just I had to do something, man, because the other way wasn't working, and it seemed like it was making sense to me. And I saw, I joined a couple of Facebook groups of ketogenic success stories or whatever. And I was like, wow. Look. And then I'd ask her a question. Hey, what do you guys do if you're got the munchies? And then bam, you get all these beef sticks, pork rinds or whatever, and I was like, oh, that's a great idea. I was like, I like this. And then just, it grew from there, and my education grew within it too. I mean, I'm still learning all the time. There's so much information out there, but I know for my body type and what works for me the last 2 years, almost 3 years, has been carnivore pretty much. I do dabble in once in a while, a little bit of sourdough bread that the wife has, a little bit of stevia in my coffee, because all those years of Dunkin' Donuts and extra sugar and cream, it's tough to shake it, man. So I still have a little sweetness I need in my coffee with bone broth, though. I will load it up with, make it nutritious and try to make it worth my time to be drinking it. But yeah, man, I love eating steak. It was perfect for me. I like steak all the time. Yes.
Well, who doesn't like steak, right?
I know, right?
So and I think this is kind of the path that a lot of people take, right? Is like, and this is again, sadly, where I think we've, as a profession, that we failed ourselves, and we continue to kind of repeat some of these mistakes over and over again. The lifespan issues, and then you start to see the data on the heart attacks when police officers are having heart attacks. And there's a lot more information available to us now than there was even 20 years ago. I think we still have a long way to go in terms of educating the police population. But do you remember when you started this diet, if you had any blood tests done? Were you looking at your lipids at all, or was that not even on your radar?
We had a yearly physical, like all departments have, and I just remember being told my cholesterol was high. They're trying to get me on, statins. My wife was like, no, and she's more of that naturopathic side of stuff. And it was just, I just didn't want to get caught up in the pill mill. I'd been to so many dead bodies and had to write down, on the death certificate or whatever, the notification you got to send to the medical examiner, doctor will sign or whatever. And I'm filling out prescriptions after prescriptions. And I'm like, this is what killed the guy. I'm putting a big bag into evidence of all these freaking pills. And I just didn't want to go down that route. I knew there's another way. And I didn't know it, but getting off of processed food, seed oils and all that was the biggest thing for me. And once I got rid of all that stuff, the healing started with my body. And I don't have to eat every 2 hours like they said. Fasting's not going to kill me. There was all kinds of stuff I picked up, and I was like, wow, they've been lying to me about that too.
Yeah, it's interesting because everybody comes to these things in their own way, right? And generally, cops tend to trust other cops, but cops also tend to be very suspicious of things. Why? Because of the things you just said, right? They're the ones that are on the scene, and I guess I don't want to get too graphic, but I probably couldn't even count the number of, bodies that I've seen and over the span of my career where people have died from obesity, or they've died in the bathroom, they've died in their sleep, and there is a common theme between all those. And the longer you work, you realize, man, it's not always just the well, it was becoming more and more rare for it to be in a house where somebody, 85, 95 years old, dies in their sleep. It was, the diseases of civilization, as I think some people like to call it, of Western civilization in particular. You see it all the time. So yeah, so we did the blood test. We used the NMR. For those that are not familiar, the it's the nuclear magnetic resonance test. It's basically like an fMRI for the blood, and it looks at a particle count. And if you go back to the episode where we had Matt Martin on from Precision Health Reports, we talk a little bit more detail about that. But that's kind of like the peek under the hood, right? Whereas cops, a lot of times the weight gain kind of builds over time. Where you're just kind of like what Dr. Gil Martin says, right? You just don't feel yourself all the time. The hibernating bear kind of becomes the angry bear. Your hormones are getting messed up. Your emotions, are on these roller coaster rides. And then God forbid, if you get involved in a traumatic event like you were involved in, right? Where high stress and, the way that people, medicated on that 15, 10, 15, 20 years ago. And sadly, and even in some places still today, right? What's the answer is, well, it's medication, or it's alcohol, or, other things to cope and to deal. And I'm not saying that, under the right circumstances with the right type of care, those things aren't appropriate. But I'll also say, I'm not a doctor. I didn't stay in a Holiday Inn Express last night, but but I can see with my own eyes, right?
Yeah.
And I can see the difference, and I can tell when somebody's on to something that's working, and that's working well for them, and when they're not.
Yeah, you had mentioned the blood work, and I was thinking about it. I was like, yeah, it was only the cholesterol is all they were ever concerned about, And then once I dove into the cholesterol world and started understanding it and understanding how your diet can affect it, and it's just it's kind of fascinating on some level, because I was educating myself. I'm like, and then I found I was more educated than some of the doctors I was talking to about it, because they're reading off a script. Not they don't care about their patients, but they're just part of going through the motions that they've been taught and what they've been doing. And I was like, man, and they, I'd mentioned the ketogenic way, and they're like, oh, wow, it's, all that fat, it could be, raise your cholesterol level. And they were scaring me. And I'm like, man, I feel fantastic though. You guys are on this side of it, and, but yeah, it was, the keto thing is just kind of a way I use it as a tool to get off of processed foods. You don't have to go keto. You can go paleo, as long as you get off some of that toxic stuff and you're eating clean. I think we're all kind of, I can eat some more plant-based diets at times. And, I'm not a big plant-based guy, but, I can have certain foods now, like potatoes. If I go to breakfast with a bunch of cops and, they throw hash browns on the plate, I might have a few of them, I might get a bagel now and then, but, I'm not over carbing myself the way I was for freaking 48 years that I was doing, and I don't know. Dr. Gil Martin was the first one I ever heard that talked about the cookie that you eat now is not the same cookie that they had 30 years ago, based on the ingredients and the stuff that in it. And that opened my eyes. I'm like, yeah, he's right. How come the burgers that, my mom got at McDonald's were different than the ones we got now, And then you understand it, you start reading into it.
Did you ever watch Super Size Me? Did you ever see that
Yeah.
documentary?
All the
Yeah, I mean, I think there were some problems, I think, with the way that was done, but there was also some things where, when you see some French fries and a hamburger that have been sitting out for like, what was that, like a year?
something like that. Yeah.
It's crazy. It's like, oh my gosh, it hasn't
Not even the
changed.
bugs will eat it. It's like, They won't even eat it. So yeah, it's been quite the journey, and like you were talking about this camping lifestyle, I put my flag up at all these different campgrounds, and they'll walk over and like, "Hey, you a cop? You retired?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm retired." They're like, how you retired? And I expect, there's expecting some old guy, and I'm out there running around with my kids, and they're like, "You must have went out on a medical or something." I'm like, "Well, I kind of went on my own terms." But it breaks the ice, and we start talking, and they're like, "Yeah, we thought about changing our diets. Look at us," because almost every camper I know is out there is obese and they're on medication, especially if they're retired folk. The weekenders are different. They just show up for the weekend and leave. But the long-term campers, they're metabolically sick, and I saw that all these cops, military guys, it could be fire, it could be nurses, whoever that we were coming across, they're all obese. And then I would pick up a couple guys along the way that would hit me up. "Hey man, well, I watched the video or I watched the podcast you were on, and I'm really looking at trying to change my diet. And I'm looking at changing doctors. Do you know anybody?" I'm like, "Oh boy, do I know. I got a whole network of doctors that are real MDs that are part of this world. And you can do it, online. You could go fly and see them, whatever you need. There's a way. You're just not stuck with your own little network of your doctor because the insurance company says you got to go here, you got to go there." And it became my flag was just an awesome tool to use. And then the whole reason the cops and campers thing got started because the campground told me to take the flag down. So I don't know if you want to get into that, but that's a whole nother.
Yeah, hold that thought for just a second, because I do want to come back to that. But there's a theme in policing. It's kind of the warrior mentality. In the last 5 years or so, warrior, guardian, whatever. There's going to be a time where any police officer is going to have to fight, and it could be the fight for their life, right? And so we go to defensive tactics training, we go to firearms training, we're doing ground fighting, we're doing defensive driving, we're doing all these things. But the one thing that we don't do well is the one thing that's killing most cops, and that's metabolic dysregulation, being metabolically dysfunctional, gaining weight, the slow or sometimes even fast creep. And so that saying that the warrior, right, be the one, the old saying is like, yeah, out of every 100 people, 90 are just cannon fodder, whatever whatever they call it. 10 are true warriors, but there's only one that brings the rest of them home. And I, it's an inspirational saying, based on, old ancient warrior ethos. But I like for people to start thinking about, like, you got to be the one for yourself. And you have to do the research, and you have to do the work. And it's kind of, you got to be careful about where you place your trust and who you place your trust in. And if you, just like, your friend that you saw with your own eyes, right? Like, this guy's literally transforming before me, and, he's dunking on me. I can't keep up with him. Either he's going in the right direction or I'm going in the wrong direction, or maybe it's both. And and now that timeline really gets accelerated. So I think it's inspirational when people do take the time to kind of start to, to not be afraid, to kind of step out there a little bit, to be a little bit vulnerable and ask the questions, and maybe try to do things a little bit different, and then, the life you save might be your own, right?
Yeah, I mean, how many cops do you know that are divorced? They're struggling with two families now. They're working details. It's just, man, if you can't get your health under control, I mean, it's just a recipe for metabolic disease, and you're going to die young. I mean, it sucks, but that's where you're headed, and I've seen it over and over again.
And the good thing is, it doesn't have to be that way. Right. With a little bit of education, a little bit of knowledge, and no one can do it for you. Like that was the other thing too. Is look, department resources, I don't care where you go, there's going to be a limit, there's going to be a cap in what they can do. I think we're getting better at making sure that we're providing the right types of resources, but there's a part of that, it's your life, it's your health. You have to be responsible for what you're doing, and you have to be responsible for you and your family and what you do. But I say this all the time: the start with the blood work, start with the labs, get to understand and know what your risks are. If you are overweight, and if you've had issues for a while, if you have family history, then you really do need to get a coach, get a medical professional that can help you along, especially for someone that if you're taking medications currently, you can, if you go fat, you start a fasting diet, or if you start a ketogenic diet and don't tell your doctor, and you continue to take the medications in the same dosage, it's that can be very problematic. So just want to make sure the audience knows that we're not giving medical advice here, but we are telling you that you got to do something, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not, I found so much success just through eating right, that it's so easy. It was so easy. I was like, yeah, once obviously cravings and food addiction is a real thing. I mean, we all suffer through it. I mean, I can still tell you what almost every fast food restaurant's burger or chicken sandwich tastes like right now. I haven't had it in years, but it's been almost put into our minds, like with the different ingredients and they know what they're doing. When you have the tobacco companies take over the food industry, what do you think is going to happen? They're going to make the food highly addictive. They did it with cigarettes. I mean, I know that going into it. And I took it as I was offended and angered by the fact that I was a test rat for these guys, and I said, you know what, no more, and I'm going to spread the word. So now it's been more of a motivational, and and seeing the success that people have able to do themselves. Like, I don't have to take on a client for months. I usually get you a month. I set you on your ways. I set you free, because if you're going to eat that garbage at the drive-through, it's garbage. It's going to make you feel like this, and it's going to do this to your insulin levels, or you're already coached by that point. And once in a while people dive back in that old world, but they come back out of it and they show more success later on. And it takes a while.
Absolutely. So you're like the keto nomad. You're driving around your trailer, you're putting your thin blue line flag up, and so you're developing this kind of persona, but you're also developing a following. And I don't know, I'll let you tell us a story about how that where that led to a little maybe a little bit of a movie getting made or something.
Yeah. It started with, we left Niagara Falls in New York. This is part of a Great Lakes tour, and it was the first one we saw. We saw the St. Lawrence, the Niagara River and all that. It was really cool. And we drove about 2 hours south or outside of New York City at a campground there, and set up, put my flag up. My kids were playing in the playground, and I walked over there, just made a cocktail, just started chilling. We're camping, right? And this guy rolls up in a golf cart. I knew he worked there. He had a little t-shirt on. And he's like, dude, you got to take down your flag. I was like, that's pretty funny, dude. I thought he was just busting my balls, right? And he's like, no, you got to take your flag down. I was like, oh, you're serious. So I turn on my phone, which is weird, because now I'm the civilian turning on my phone, because I was never that guy, but here I am, that guy, right? But I just couldn't believe it. I wanted to record it. And I was like, so what are you telling me to do? And he starts, you got corporate saying you got to take down your thin blue line flag. I'm like, who's saying that? And he's like, my boss, I'm like, send your boss over here. And I kind of go off on the video, I'm like, I'm going to send some PSOS over here to tell me to take down my thin blue line, and I lost it a little bit. And there's a lot more that happened. My wife calmed things down. Manager came over. They were going to call the cops on the cop for flying its cop flag, which is weird. But I didn't want to take the ride that night in a New York jail. It was, the year after COVID. I'm like, they still don't like us. So I was like, I don't want us to be sitting in a jail, even though it'd be great for Fox, it'd probably make Fox News or something. But I decided to put the flag in my truck just for the night and sleep on it. And we had the reservation for 8 days. So I decided to stay for 8 days, and we became an irritant. The flag went on the rig. They don't owe the rig. They own the land. And then every police thing I had came out of the trailer. Our blankets became our tablecloths. The t-shirts became chair covers. We had mugs. It looked like I was selling Thin Blue Line stuff, and people were walking up. And it turned into something to where the local news found out, and they did a news story on it. They're like, Hudson Valley News, retired wounded cop, blah, blah, blah. And then Big Frog radio station had me live on the air, like for drive time or something. And it just took off. And then cops started canceling their memberships at that camping group called Thousand Trails. They started going on their website. This is how you treat cops, blah, blah, blah. A bunch of freaking diehard guys just losing their shit. Yeah. And then Thousand Trails reached out to me and said, well, you're suspended for 2 months now because you were belligerent to our employees. So they snapped back. So then I went again and put it out there. I'm like, well, they suspended me now. And they're like, what? Some more cops started, dropping their memberships. And then 4 different campgrounds in upstate New York reached out and said, hey, man, bring your flag, your rig, and your family. You're staying with us. And they offered us free stay. And it was all these different places in New York that we would have never gone to. I didn't even know they existed. And one of the places was Ithaca, New York. And it was called Spruce Row. And he goes, hey, come bring your family out. And they had a charity weekend. It was a bunch of cops everywhere, cops in a band playing like country and like Southern rock music. And I was like, man, this is an awesome vibe. And I asked the owner, I'm like, hey, how would you like to have a Cops and Campers event, like just like this, except it's called Cops and Campers? It's like, let's do it. So we scheduled it for June 2022 of last summer. Sold the campground out. National Guard came out with bounce houses for the kids. We had a bonfire Friday night, movie for the kids so the kids could be distracted. The cops could talk shop and just get to know each other and drink some beers and, just hang out. Saturday came, and we had the big concert, and it was just, cornhole tournament, all this stuff. It was just R&R, and being with guys you didn't trust. Not that you didn't trust, you didn't know, but now you're trusting these guys and these stories, and you're just throwing it out there. It's like going on a conference or something where you just network with different people. And so many wives came up to me and said, man, my husband really needed this. He's been kind of lost since he retired. He's not part of anything. He's lonely, depressed. You already know which way I'm going with this.
Right.
A lot of them already have bad diets to begin with. Some of them made friends, So I had actually had a friend of mine as a former police officer that's a film maker. And I go, hey, Patrick, he did one I was in, and it's called it was called Cops and Cabins, where we did a retreat program in a cabin in the Blue Ridge Mountains. About 8 of us just hung out telling stories, and he did a short film on that. So he came out and did a documentary, like a 32-minute documentary on the whole weekend, interviewing people, getting the whole vibe of the weekend, and just trying to understand that this is what this is about. We're camping, but we're also helping each other. And my goal overall is to get health practitioners out there. I got to get the cops to the party first, right? Hey, let's have a keg party, get them there. And then we're like, all right, we're not going to have any more kegs in the future, but you got to get them there, right? So we have to watch your alcohol intake. We got to watch the carbs, but that's my goal. If I can get them to get a little bit of help, through meditation, and maybe even talk to some practitioners that can help them get them off of the medication. Man, I asked them, how many of you guys are on medication? Every one of them was raising their hand. Not normal. We shouldn't have all this many people on meds. Never through in our history of man have we been like this, and it hits them. They're like, wow, you're kind of right. Yeah, I know I'm right.
What's the name of the movie that was made?
Oh, it's called Cops and Campers. It's just like I said, the little 32-minute documentary where they talk to me. I cry in it because I break down, because I always cry during most podcasts and anything emotional. They talk to my wife. She brings a little bit of sense to everything, like we're all beast mode, and they got to bring the beauty in here to calm us all down. All right, like King Kong. And but yeah,
so you can find that on Netflix, or
it's right now it's on copsandcampers.com, and it's also
okay.
On all my keto groups. It's on there, and it's also on Officer Involved Project. He Patrick did a couple of movies where he won awards. One of them was the we all know this one. Remember the guy, that Dink Heller video where he put his own dash camera up and he got gunned down by that old man, and the whole time you're yelling, shoot him, and he just won't
Yeah.
ever shoot the guy. Well, he did a very powerful documentary on that, talking to the family, talking to the officers, and everything involved in that whole case. So I knew he'd be a good fit for this. He put a little a little sadness in it, like, oh, we need to get together. But I knew he'd do a good project with it, and he did great, man. And it's going to be free. It's just I want it to get out there so I can spread this and have these events across the country. I mean, I'm not saying it's going to be like Bike Week in Daytona, which would be cool if we could have cop events like that and have some like Five Finger Death Punch playing at one of these concerts or something. But you got to start somewhere. And I know I've already been reached out. Some people in Phoenix have reached out. I know a couple of close cop buddies out there. I've got some people in Utah that talked about it. And obviously Tennessee, North Carolina, and South Florida. I mean, they want to have something down here bad, but it's, it's logistics. I got to find campgrounds. I got to get, it's a little bit more than I anticipated when I jumped into this. When I was in the back of a truck at a rally going, we're going to turn this around. We're going to start cops and campers. I didn't know it was going to become this whole new endeavor, but it's been, man, it's being able to help these guys and get them together in a therapeutic environment without the pressure of the job and being forced to go. It's not forced training. You're coming here to camp. We're going to sit around a campfire, and we all got stories. We all got trauma. We've all got stuff that we have, maybe we haven't even come to grips with, that we need to get out and manage. And this has been, I mean, I don't know, it's helped me, and I know it can help these other guys. And based on the feedback I've been getting, it seems like they want it. They still want more of these little events. So I'm going to keep going.
That's awesome. That's the old, as my mom would say, right? That's, taking lemons and making some lemonade.
Man, my wife was like, I was so mad at you the way, because I lost it, man. I was one of those maniacs that we would get called to that wouldn't calm down. You're like, dude, if you don't calm down, we're going to take your ass to jail, right? That type of thing. I was so hot when they told me to take down the flag. I went in the red. I couldn't come down. And that's when I realized it. Like, man, I'm in the red over this whole flag incident. Like, what? What if I got violent? I mean, was it worth it? So I had to fix it. I had to turn it around,
Yeah, well, definitely sounds like it, it turned there's a happy ending there. It turned into something positive. But it just, there's that we could have a whole nother podcast episode on talking about the thin blue line flag. And, now I see these stories where, it's been hijacked. It's become a symbol of hate and a symbol of racism. And I'm like, no, it hasn't. Just because a few small people, carry it in a rally, and there, whether there's questionable politics involved, I'm like, no, it doesn't. It doesn't. If the same people are carrying, people have burned American flags, right? You can go back to Woodstock and in the time in the 60s and watch people doing terrible things with the American flag. But it's still the symbol of our country, and it's this, the greatest symbol of freedom that's ever flown anywhere in the history of the world. So I get a little emotional about it myself too. So I just,
I found a lot of people don't even understand it. They don't even know what it means. Yeah. They'll come to the campground and be like, so what does your blue line mean? I'm like, you don't know what it means? Like, explain it to them. And I also explain to them that sometimes you'll see one with a red line. That could be fire department, or you might see a green one. It could be military. It could be a sheriff's office. You see gray or it could be corrections, and pink for nurses. I go, everyone's got their own whatever. I go, that's what it means for us. And for me, it was always, I've been seeing that flag at funerals since I was a kid.
Yeah.
And that just was always meant that was our gang. I know they look at, oh, it's your gang, but no, that was our group. Like I played high school sports. We had colors, right, that represented our school. It was just, I took pride in it. And, you go back, it's the difference between order and chaos, and that line moves based on society. It's not just always definite, and unfortunately, we're the ones that are right there on the front lines. And I think we get overlooked on that we're still part of the community. It's trying to battle both sides of this argument,
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy to think about the people that are responsible for protecting the First Amendment. You really get into these, these engagements sometimes where people are trying to strip you of that same right, the thing that, that you stand for. And yeah, I could go down a whole.
Whole
You have to
nother
go back
show.
and read one of my op-eds that I wrote in our local newspaper years ago, when I got into a little spiff with a local reporter. Yeah, and that's sometimes it's unfortunate that those things happen, but there's good that comes from a lot of these things, and the fact that the whole cops and campers, and I know we've been going for a while, so I want to touch on this for a little bit, and then we can wrap it up. But you mentioned something there where the spouses were coming up to you, and I actually started to get a little choked up when you said that. And I'm now retired for a year, and I still work with organizations that work with the police a lot, so I still feel like I'm very connected.
Yeah.
But I do know people that that don't have that type of connection. You spend your whole life dedicating yourself to in service to your community, and then the next day you're not. And that's a big adjustment. That's a big change. So to have an organization, or to have events like what you're doing and what are popping up as a result of that, I think is pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't expect this. I was just trying to camp, and now I'm like trying to organize rallies. But another thing is my kids are understanding this. They're watching their dad, and they're saying, all right, dad believes in this. Dad, is surrounded by, they meet all my cop buddies and all these people, they see that we're normal people. We're not like all like Nazis, or we're hating on people for their color or their skin or anything. We're all, because my department, my kids know this. We're so diverse down here in South Florida that, my academy class, I was looking back, I was showing my kids my academy class of us 25, and we're so diverse, from women, Black, Hispanic, Asian. So that's why when I went out there and did patrol, I didn't think, of it was right and wrong to me, and you're a bad guy, you're a bad guy. That's it. And that's how I grew up. Yeah. And my kids are seeing it. And, I don't want them to ever feel like their dad is so far on the right of like, yeah, it's only cop way. I admit, when we make mistakes, we'll watch videos. Yeah, that cop was a little bit aggressive there, and he's going to pay the price, or they were, or whatever situation. I explain it to them.
Yep.
I don't want them to be cops, but all I'm doing is training them to be freaking cops. I'm not trying to, man. But we'll play Nerf gun wars, and I'm like, muzzle discipline, get your muzzle down, I'm like, oh, I'm teaching to be a sniper. I'm like, no, what am I doing, But you're going to be good at it one way or the other. So.
Well, I'm glad you are. I'm glad you are, Ed. And I've talked about this several times, but a future in which people that work in this profession are no longer promoting their family and their loved ones to join it. That should be a warning sign to everybody in this country that who's going to do it? If not the best of what our society has to offer, if we're not encouraging them, if we can't find the time or the patience to try to understand what it's like to do a very difficult job, being a human being and being imperfect, being fallible. We're in big trouble. We're in big trouble if we don't have good people that are willing to, as you said, put the bat belt on and go out there and do the job. So, all right. Well, this has been a fun conversation. We're going to have to do it again. My mind is already spinning about how do we help get organized.
I get my mom to come on here. You guys can talk some old school.
Absolutely.
She can promote the Netflix show, and then
I tell you what, well, I don't know. People, I don't know if you've ever watched the documentary Snow. Yeah, or maybe was it powder also? There's a couple of them, talking about how, South Florida, in particular during the early days of cocaine and then crack cocaine. People don't realize how violent it was. We're looking now at the spike in violent crime in 2020, 2022. Shootings are up, unfortunately, but as bad as it seems right now, it's not half as bad as it was in the 80s. I mean, the
Yeah.
number of people that were getting killed, the gang wars that were going on. I mean, the violence was off the charts, and there were cops out there that were, wading right into the middle of all of that. So that was crazy time. So yeah, definitely, that would be a fun conversation.
Yeah, she's got some good stuff. And, you look back at those, they were brutal, man. And my mom saw families murdered, and here she is, a 30-year-old detective. And I know she suffers from stuff. I could never tell her that without getting, a stern look, but I feel it. I know she's got some trauma, and it's natural. I mean, you can't see some of that stuff and not take home a little bit of it. I mean, I always tell people I sold a piece of my soul for that pension. Some of the stuff we had to see, some of the stuff we had to do, but we know that. And, I was able to get out in time to at least be able to save my soul to spend that pension.
Well, I appreciate you doing it, and maybe we can reframe that thought, and you can say that you sacrificed a part of your soul so that others could live the American dream.
Yeah, there
And
you go.
I hope that people recognize, that it was a sacrifice. I know I do, and I appreciate everything you've done, and I really appreciate everything that you're doing to help spread the word on good nutrition, on good health, using yourself as an example and your story as an example of what is possible. Um, just takes a little bit of courage, and man, you've shown you've shown a lot more courage than most. Yeah,
Man.
going keto is one thing, right? But selling the house and buying a camper and hitting the road, that's next level stuff, man. Hats off
Yeah.
to you.
It's been awesome, and I encourage more people to try the camping lifestyle, man. What a getaway. Just book a weekend somewhere. You can have a trailer delivered. You don't even have to own one. They'll have one set up for you. Just check in like a hotel and check out, man. It's pretty crazy. But yeah, I mean,
Nature,
I've been
nature is medicine.
I've been very blessed, and like you said, nature. Oh wow, discovering now when I do my yoga or I stretch. I'm not a big yogi, but I will do some yoga stretches. But I'll be outside. I'm looking at the beach or I'm looking at these trees in the mountains, and you know what? Talk about therapy. It's something. It's I don't know what the answer is, but getting back to nature is definitely a good start.
Well, so where can people follow you? So we've talked about your KetoFiveO website. What are other
Everything
social media on?
I'm on everything's KetoFiveO, FIVEO, and like the Hawaii 50, and it's all over Twitter, Instagram. I'm on TikTok. Yeah, I know, but it's providing a little bit of needed revenue on the side that I'm trying to dabble into. So it
Awesome.
works. But we're all over there. I show my kids off. My kids are eating clean, and one's a ninja warrior type kid. He does these really crazy stuff. He's part of a school, and I see what his nutrition can do for him, not only physically but mentally. And hey man, some of these tours you're going across the country, let me know, how do I get part of these, man? I'm traveling, I could show up and crash some of these parties you're going to.
That's just freaking awesome. Yes. All right. Well, I'm gonna have to find. So, do you post on your website? Do you have like where you're going to be or where any of these events are going, or is just follow you on your social media stuff?
Copsandcampers.com will have any social events going on with the camping group, but I'm always talking about it in my KetoFiveO group because it's the same kind of network. One's just more nutrition based and the other is more camping based, but it's all about getting us help. And you can find it, like I was saying, KetoFiveO.com or copsandcampers.com. And it's all over Instagram, it's all over Twitter, and it's on Facebook, of course, and YouTube. There is a channel. You want to see some of the shootings and we worked on a farm for 3 months, slaughtering animals, driving tractors. I mean, it's a whole it should be a TV show of some of the stuff we've been doing. I mean, I'm a suburban kid from Miami. I never drove a tractor. I didn't know what farming was, and now I'm like
You're like Pauly Shore, weren't you?
totally. I'm chasing steers. We had these steers break through the fence. I'm like running after them. I'm like, what do I do with steers? They're like 900 pounds. What do I do with it? You just can't put a leash around it. I tried that. It didn't work. You just pulled me down the road. So, but it's been a blast learning how to do some of this stuff just because we're free. We're off the rat race and we're able to take a chance and do some different things while my kids are young. They're still into their parents right now. A couple more years, they'll be into girls. So.
All right.
Yeah.
Oh, hey, thank you very much for being here. I appreciate you taking some time out of your travels and your tours. And we're definitely going to have to do this again.
All right, man. Well, hey, you can come to Cops and Campers Part 2. It's in Ithaca this summer.
All right. Well, I'll have to talk to you about that offline.
Okay.
All right. Until next time, everybody, 1042. So get on there, follow KetoFiveO on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. We'll see you.